Okay, so today we're going on an absolutely wild journey. It's a story that actually starts with something super relatable, literally just a tense father-son conflict. But then it completely explodes into this mind-bending cosmic mystery about the actual nature of reality itself.
We're pulling today's explainers straight from a truly remarkable ancient Buddhist text called the Sutra of the Assembling of Father and Son. And what makes this text so brilliant, honestly, is how it perfectly balances epic, almost mythological storytelling with these incredibly profound philosophical teachings. It basically uses grand, sweeping visuals to teach deep, universal truths.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to cover the king's doubts, the father-son reunion, those massive celestial offerings, the Buddhist prophecies, and finally wrap up with questions on emptiness and the ultimate truth. Let's jump right into Section 1, the king's doubts.
Right, so we start with King Śuddhodana, and he is just utterly confused. He literally cannot fathom why his son, the Buddha, would just walk away from a life of royal opulence for a harsh, bare-bones life out in the forest. But then, a disciple named Udayan steps up to explain this, and he brilliantly contrasts their two worldviews. Think about the king's conventional idea of luxury, right? Soft beds, bright lamps, armed guards, gorgeous palaces. But Udayan counters with what the Buddha considers the ultimate luxury. He uses the four immeasurables, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, as his bed. He uses supreme wisdom as his actual light, and the 10 powers as his guards. It's just a masterful reframing, shifting entirely from earthly wealth to spiritual detachment.
Moving on to Section 2, the father-son reunion.
So the king is completely moved by Udayan's explanation, and he decides, you know what, I have to go reunite with my son. And to do this, he puts together a truly staggering display of earthly power. I mean, the ancient text goes out of its way to describe this intense color coordination to really show off the sheer scale of his wealth. Imagine entire battalions outfitted exclusively in green. Green chariots, green armor, green flags, then a whole yellow section, then red, then white, and then multicolored. And if that somehow wasn't enough to make a statement, trailing behind this massive rainbow army are 80,000 jeweled elephants and 80,000 horses. It is literally the ultimate flex of worldly power.
Which brings us to Section 3, offerings of devas and dragons. Because as impressive as that royal army is, all of that earthly wealth, it's about to be completely overshadowed. When the king actually arrives, these mythological beings, we're talking gods, dragons, titans, they show up too to pay their respects to the Buddha. And the scale of their offerings is just absolute madness. The Asuras offer 60 million jeweled canopies and chariots. The Garudas just conjure up 68,000 seven-tiered treasure pavilions right out of thin air. And the Naga girls? They rain down 960 million umbrellas, along with actual showers of pearls and perfume. They literally fill the entire sky with billions of magical artifacts that instantly make the king's giant procession look tiny.
Section 4, the Buddha's prophecies. Now you might be wondering, how exactly does the Buddha respond to a sky filled with unimaginable treasures? Well, he doesn't just say a quick thank you. He actually smiles, emits this brilliantly colored light from his face, and starts issuing very specific prophecies. He tells them that through their pure intentions and these incredible offerings, these mythological creatures aren't just going to get some good karma, they are eventually going to achieve full Buddhahood themselves. So, the Asuras are prophesied to become the supreme lamp Tathagata. The Garudas will become the Meru banner Tathagata, and the Nagas will become the peaceful wisdom Tathagata.
All right, Section 5, questions on emptiness.
Up to this point, we've got what feels like a fairly straightforward, if, incredibly magical, tale of devotion and reward. But suddenly, this mythological being named Great Tree, the Kinara king, speaks up and just shatters the entire narrative we've been building. He points out a massive Socratic paradox. He basically says, hold on a second. You've taught us that the universe is just an illusion, an echo, that it's completely empty of inherent existence. So, if that's true, how can you give very real prophecies about real future events? Honestly, how can empty beings do empty karma to get an empty enlightenment?
It's a totally brilliant philosophical trap, right? So to solve this puzzle, we really have to define what the text actually means by emptiness or sunyata. Emptiness is absolutely not nothingness. It doesn't mean things just don't exist at all. Rather, it's the fundamental lack of inherent independent existence. A good way to think about it is this. Things exist, for sure, but only in dependence on a huge web of conditions. They simply don't exist totally on their own, from their own side.
And that brings us to our final section, the ultimate truth.
The Buddha doesn't just hand the Kanara king some dry academic lecture to solve this paradox. Instead, he builds his answer using 3 super vivid analogies to show exactly how illusions can still function perfectly. First up, he compares karma, offerings, and prophecies to a mirror. Think about it. Have you ever tried to literally grab a reflection? You can't. A reflection appears perfectly and clearly based on certain conditions, right? You need the mirror, the light, the object, yet the reflection itself contains absolutely no physical substance. It's totally empty, but it still functions perfectly to show you an image.
Next, he brings out the famous chariot analogy. If you look at the individual parts, you've got wheels, an axle, a wooden frame, but none of these individual pieces are actually the chariot. If you take the whole thing completely apart, the chariot basically disappears. The word chariot is really just a convenient label we slap on these parts when they're assembled and functioning together. So the Buddha explains that just like that vehicle, a person who's receiving a prophecy is just a handy label for a collection of empty, functioning parts. There is no permanent, unchanging self secretly hidden inside the machine.
Finally, we get the fire analogy. And this one brilliantly illustrates cause and effect without needing some sort of central creator. Imagine a really fierce wind starts blowing and it causes tree branches to rub violently against each other. Eventually, that natural friction just creates fire. The wind didn't decide to make a fire. The branches definitely didn't plan to start burning. Just like wind rubbing branches naturally creates fire through conditions, karma operates completely naturally. It doesn't need a central self or some independent soul pulling the strings for the whole system to keep functioning.
Which leads us directly to the absolute core teaching of this text, the 2 truths. The Buddha resolves the whole paradox by showing that we are actually navigating 2 realities at the exact same time. Conventionally, in our everyday lives, karma, the Father, the Son, those massive armies, the prophecies, they are all completely real and they function perfectly. But ultimately, in absolute reality, all of these phenomena are entirely empty. They are exactly like those reflections in a mirror. They happen, we experience them, but they just don't have a solid core.
So we've gone from a really tense royal family reunion to billions of celestial offerings, all the way down to the empty fabric of reality itself. And I want to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought straight from this ancient explainer. If reality is indeed empty and malleable, like a mirage or an echo, well, you still have to live in it. So what kind of world will you choose to build within the illusion?